With all the talk around the new film Alien Romulus, I thought it'd be a good time to rewatch the 2012 film Prometheus. It's been about 12 years since I've seen it, and I remember despite some movie critics bashing it, I thought it was a really good film. Prometheus is the prequel to perhaps the greatest science fiction film of all time, the 1979 movie Alien. While Prometheus is not a perfect movie, it manages to have a compelling storyline, great acting, terrific CGI, and even dive into some serious philosophical questions. The story centers around a group traveling to a planet in outer space. Several scientists on board believe that the origin of life is there and that something will have the answers on how and why mankind was created. As the movie progresses, the group gets more than they bargained for, though, and the movie ends with several questions unanswered, open to interpretation. After the group wakes up from stasis, the group soon touches down on the planet, where they believe our creators, whom they call the engineers, reside. They soon spot an artificially made structure and enter it. They see the engineers are there and are all deceased, leading them to believe they went extinct millennia ago. Something appears to have happened to them or killed them off. A storm soon comes out and the group has to rush back to the ship. Two of the group don't make it though and are stuck in the structure. Charlie, one of the scientists, begins boozing and is extremely upset the creators are dead. Meanwhile, the other lead scientist and main character Elizabeth test some samples and discover that the being's DNA matches ours. Around this time, we see one of the key scenes in the film. David, a robot, approaches Charlie to see why he is so upset. Charlie goes on to tell David he's upset since they won't learn why they were created. David then asks Charlie why he was created, and Charlie answers, because we can. David then suggests perhaps the engineers created mankind because they could. This is a key scene in the film that partially answers the question around where mankind came from. It answers why the engineers created mankind, but then the question rises, who created the engineers? One other key thing that happens here is David spikes Charlie's water with alien blood. Earlier in the film, we see David spying on Elizabeth's dreams, which suggest he is curious and independent. These are not characteristics one wants in their cyborgs. Spiking Charlie's drink suggests David can't be trusted. Next, Charlie gets intimate with Elizabeth. That same night, in the artificial structure, we see some black ooze has transformed the small worms into predators. In the structure, the worms have grown bigger and stronger and eventually kill the two men left behind. The next day, the group heads back to search for their two men. They find both have been killed, and Charlie at this time is getting sicker. David, in the mission, discovers a room with an engineer in stasis. One is still alive. With Charlie getting really sick, they attempt to head back to the ship, but Captain Victor's, played by Charlize Theron, won't let him on board and kill him. Some speculate that Charlize Theron is actually a cyborg in this film. I'm not really sure why though, since her and Idris Elba have sex. Some say the scene wasn't shown though, but before she is crushed at the end of the movie, she shows fear, clearly a human emotion. In addition, she was in stasis. Coming back to the film, soon Elizabeth discovers she's 3 months pregnant, which makes no sense to her considering she was in stasis. David tells her the fetus looks abnormal, and in one of the better scenes in the movie, she scrambles and has a robotic surgery pod remove the fetus. The group then heads out again to the structure, and David releases the engineer in stasis. David speaks to the engineer in a primitive language and is decapitated. There's questions here about what he said, but I don't think David's actions were malevolent. After removing David's head, the engineer then kills everyone there but Shaw. While many were confused why the engineer was so hostile to their creation, it seems to me this is because of what has become of mankind. Much of the movie is open to interpretation, but what I believed happened is the engineers were creating something to wipe out mankind on Earth. However, it became too powerful and killed all them. One engineer managed to survive and hid out in stasis until the threat was gone. When he woke up, he was dead set on finishing the mission. As he takes off in the spaceship, Idris Elba and company ram their ship to knock it down and crash it and prevent the engineer to getting to Earth. We soon see that Elizabeth's fetus, which we thought was dead earlier in the film, is not only still alive, but also has grown to an enormous size. The engineer then shows up and attacks Elizabeth. She opens the door, and the enormous creature attacks the engineer, dragging it into the room. Elizabeth locks the door, and the engineer is killed, and the creature lays eggs inside it. Elizabeth is all alone on the planet now, except for David. David persuades her that he can help her get off the planet with the other ships that are still operational. She has no interest in going back to Earth, though, and the two continue the journey to see who created the engineers. In the final scene, we see the first xenomorph pop out of the engineer's stomach. The 2012 film Prometheus is littered with themes and questions, some answered and some not. It's not entirely clear why the engineers hate mankind so much, but we know they planned on destroying humanity for quite some time. The records found earlier in the film show carbon dating back 2,000 years, meaning they have planned this for a while. We can speculate this has something to do with humanity's action and possibly our search for answers in religion. Religion tends to be a big theme in the film, as Elizabeth hopes to confirm her religious beliefs. The film in general dives into the debate around science versus religion and seems to suggest they can both be present. This is because Elizabeth, learning we came from them, sets off to discover who made the engineers. One of the other themes in the film has to do around humans obtaining the knowledge of creation and immortality. As the group all perishes in the film, this suggests that they weren't meant to understand or get the answers to these questions. As mentioned earlier, the big question in the film has to do around why humans were created, and the answer is that because the engineers could. This suggests some questions are better not asked. While I'm typically not the biggest fan of films that leave unanswered questions, Prometheus is one I'll give a pass to. It's a fun film with good acting, scary but not over-the-top monster scenes, and great CGI. The film also ties well to the 1979 film Alien, and I think doing a prequel for that is easier said than done. Generally speaking, science fiction films tend to be hit or miss most of the time, and this movie, directed by the talented Ripley Scott, is certainly no flop. I'd recommend this film and give it a B.